CNN, and this is Connect the World with me, Linda Kincaid. Welcome back. Well, Syria has just had one of the bloodiest weeks in a civil war that has dragged on for nearly 7 years. Pro-government forces, aided by Russian airstrikes, are trying to drive opposition and terror groups from their largest remaining holdout, Idlib Province. It's the home to thousands who fled the fighting and the siege of Aleppo. They now face a second nightmare. Well, CNN is the first international network to go into Idlib since warplanes bombed the area last week. Our senior international correspondent, Arwa Dammon, joins us now from Istanbul. You've just returned from the province there. Some heartbreaking scenes, Arwa.
It really is, Linda, and keep in mind, of course, that this is a population that has been going through this for years now and increasingly is feeling abandoned, to the point that a lot of people, when you talk to them, quite simply say, we have no words left. We don't know how to plead anymore because so far all of our pleas have gone unheard. No one really seems to be reacting to our tragedy, no matter how dire it becomes. Here's a look at what we saw in just a day in Idlib Province.
Yasser's tiny chest heaves with each breath. He was born during a week that, even by Syria's ungodly standards, was especially punishing. His mother Hanan's body still trembles. And that's not because he was born prematurely. It's because the hospital he was at was bombed. The footage from that night is a glimpse into the magnitude of the horror, the fear. There were around 300 people, staff, patients in intensive care, and the most precious and vulnerable. This was one of the key remaining functioning hospitals in the area, but nothing in Syria is sacred.
This is where they had the incubators for the babies.
Hanan remembers just grabbing Yasser's fragile body, wrapping it in whatever she could find, and running through the chaos. In the span of just 5 days, 6 medical facilities in Idlib province were targeted in airstrikes.
This is the lower level, basically underground. And this is where they used to do all of the main emergency surgeries. And it's also where right now they're storing whatever equipment they've managed to salvage.
Staff here want to remain anonymous. This small center in Saraqib has already been targeted twice this year. That's when Abu Omar says they announced online that they were closed and began operating in secret. Days before we arrived, as doctors were treating the wounded from an airstrike in a market, the facility was hit again. The dead from the market were outside, now buried not in graves, but somewhere in the crater left behind. This is a population that feels like it's on borrowed time. Fayez Khattab was in a makeshift underground bunker with neighbors when an alleged chlorine strike took place. He vomited, couldn't breathe, and thought, that's it, my number's up. Luckily, many of the women and children here had fled just days before. The 2 toxic shells impacted in an empty field.
There's still a little bit of sort of an acrid stench. Yeah, it's been 6 days.
2 members of the civil defense team who responded were also affected. Rami remembers shaking uncontrollably, feeling like he was screaming, "Take off the mask," but no one could hear him. Mahmoud's father was among those treated in the toxic attack, only to be killed within days in a strike as he was loading grain nearby. He's almost matter-of-fact in accepting Syria's inevitable fate for those who refuse to leave their lands. The war here has long been a science of methodical cruelty, as the world looks on and Syria endures one of the bloodiest weeks of this conflict. Hanan watches her baby fight in one of the last remaining facilities where he even stands a chance. But what kind of a world are these babies fighting to live in?
Linda, that week during the beginning of February, where the vast majority of those attacks took place, was described by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights as a no-holds-barred type of assault. One of the doctors that we were talking to outside of the main hospital in Idlib, he didn't want to go on camera, but he said, how are you going to describe this in your report? How are you going to find the language to depict exactly what it is that we're going through? Because he said, from his experience, from everything that he's witnessed, the violence in Syria truly defies logic.
It surely does. Arwa Dammon, a really great job there by you and your team. Thank you very much for bringing us that report.